This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. As always, it's our weekly tradition where you guys have hot takes, and I try to respond to these hot takes. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. If you want your hot take on this show, make sure you comment on the videos that post during the week regularly, because that's where I source the hot takes from. Is the comment section on the videos that I've uploaded the week of making the hot take. So if that's something you've been interested in, you're wondering why your hot take isn't reaching this video, just make sure that you're commenting. And if you're commenting on the most recent videos, then that'll give you a better chance of ending up here. But let's get into it. We're going to talk about these hot takes. First one comes from Sir Philip, who says this: on one hand, I get the feeling that the Browns are making moves that will end up having them in top pick contention. On the other hand, I've never seen a team that ended up eventually getting the top pick have two near universally lauded draft class. I think the Browns want to be competitive, but maximize all available resources to get the best young players possible, to include a franchise quarterback. I guess you call that culture building. Yeah, I think what the Browns are aiming to do right now is, instead of trying to force a hand and force their way into the number one pick conversation, they're just going to roll out what they got right now and see what they have, right? I think this is the ultimate, hey, we feel really good about the draft and development over the last couple of years. We don't know how good we are necessarily, but we want to figure it out. And I think this is going to be the season that helps them calibrate just how far or close they are from their ultimate goals. So I would call this a calibration season, right? A season where the Browns are just trying to figure out what it is exactly that they have on the roster. That's why they're not going out their way to have guys take spots away from young players who might be a little bit better that are available in the free agent market, right? It's why they didn't bring in any veterans at wide receiver, because they just kind of want to see what they have in this roster. And then in 2027, 2028, they'll have that information and build that roster according to what they find from this year. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going all in to try to win 10 games and make a playoff. I don't think they're going all in to try to get Arch Manning. I think they're really right now spending this season to figure out what it is that they have exactly. You know, that's why they're giving Deshaun and Shador all the chance in the world to win the starting quarterback job here. That's why that they're giving so many young players opportunities, because this is ultimately about just figuring out what it is that you have in all of these young players, right? What do you have in Quincy Judkins for real? What do you have in Dylan Sampson for real? What do you have in Shador Sanders for real? What do you have in Zion Johnson and all these other young pieces? Because right now the Browns roster, as much as it's filled with some young and exciting talent, it's also filled with a ton of question marks, and you can't really build a contender off of a bunch of question marks. I don't think they're desperate to try to make the wild card or something like that, but I do think that they are kind of in this in-between place. And this is my hot take. A lot of people will act like that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing when you're trying to force yourself into a wild card conversation when you don't have much potential to do anything more than that on your roster, right? If the Browns were going all in right now to try to make the wild card, I'd be very nervous about the future of this team. Vice versa, I think tanking is a bad strategy, right? I've talked about this plenty of times before. And I don't think the numbers support that tanking is a working strategy. Most teams get to where we want to get to by doing what the Browns are doing right now, which is dealing with the uncomfortable middle ground that they're in, right? You got to calibrate. You got to figure out what you are so you know what kind of swings you have to take. And this is where I think most contending teams are before they become contending teams. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be a contending team just because you are in this situation. But it does, I think, put you in a better spot than trying to force a bad hand by tanking, because I think that comes with a lot of collateral damage. And I think that puts you in a better spot than trying to force a good hand by trying to buy your way into a wild card, right? This is just playing it as it is, just going all natural with your roster and just letting that play out. And I think that's the best possible thing that the Browns could do. So that's where I'm at with it. I know it's not going to make a lot of people happy, right? Some people are only happy if they think the team is tanking. Some people are only happy if they think the team is going to leverage everything to try to win as many games in one season as possible. But right now, I think the Browns are just simply calibrating, right? Just how good is Harold Fannin? How much do we have to set aside for some of these players? What market are they going to hit? What do we have at quarterback? What kind of chance do we need to take right now at quarterback versus how much time do we have to do it? These are all questions that the Browns need to have answered and hopefully have answered by the end of the season. And I think that's what their goal is. So it's not the sexiest thing in the world. I know when you hear me say this is a calibration season for the Browns, you might be confused that for tanking, but I don't think it is. I think this is similar to what 2018 was for the Cleveland Browns when Baker Mayfield got here, right? Where we didn't really know what we had, so we just kind of rolled it out there, and then whatever results we got with that, we ran with, right? And then the Odell Beckham trade follows that in 2019. The same thing was done in 2020. That was a calibration year. They didn't really know what they had. They threw some pieces out there, and then they really, really went for it in 21. Obviously, it didn't work out, right? This is a calibration year for the Cleveland Browns. They got to figure out what they have so they can know what the plan can be. And hopefully this leads us to the results that we've been waiting for, which is the Browns to be legitimate Super Bowl contenders here. The next one comes from Matt, who says this: from my experience with law enforcement, this is talking about the Brendan Sorsby situation, by the way. In the court system, I've learned that accountability is huge in getting a reduced sentence or even a second chance. Yeah, and here's the thing about accountability, right? Especially like in the Brendan Sorsby situation, but like this goes for a lot of other situations in the NFL. You can't get caught and then talk about how accountable you're trying to be because you're getting punished for getting caught, right? If you spent years trying to avoid being caught, you can't tell me that now all of a sudden, because you got caught, you're being accountable. You know what I mean? Like if you blow the whistle on yourself and you say, hey, enough is enough at a certain point, and you turn yourself in, I can hear what you're saying about accountability if you're Brendan Sorsby. But the thing that rings hollow for Brendan and why he ultimately got the punishment, and I think it's deserved that he got, is because he didn't blow the whistle on himself. He got caught. And that's the only reason he was interested in doing anything about that, right? If he hadn't have gotten caught, he wouldn't have checked himself into rehab. He wouldn't have apologized about these things because he wouldn't have told us about it. But the only reason this is coming up is because he got caught. And that's something to be for real about, right? Like if you have done something wrong, and hopefully it's not anything super major, like you did harm to somebody else. But if you've done something wrong, you broke a rule, you do feel legitimately bad about it. That's why it's worth it sometimes to just be like, hey, I fucked up. Like just admit it, get ahead of it, take accountability for it. Because once you get caught, the chance to take accountability is over. Once you get caught, right? Like we could bring this, like we don't even have to do like big law things to put this in perspective, right? Most of us have grown up and you've gotten in trouble and you tried to hide something from your parents, right? There is a different reaction that you'll get, hopefully, from your parents if you let them know what you did wrong before they find out what you did wrong, right? Like that was a big thing for my family. Like my family didn't like finding out that I made a mistake, right? If I told them, there could be a conversation. if they found out, now there needs to be reparations. You feel me? You know what I mean? Like, that's just how that's going to work. So this whole Brendan Sorsby story to me is a story about how Brendan Sorsby failed himself, how every university that he was with failed himself, how his family, who placed these bets for him when they knew he wasn't supposed to be doing that, failed him. This is something that makes you have to reevaluate your whole support system, because you did make the mistake and you are ultimately responsible for that mistake. But also the fact that nobody at any point tried to hold you accountable within your support system. It's also something that you have to mark as a red flag, because how could they just let all of this go on and think nothing was going to happen? It's a group failure for sure, but it's ultimately on the shoulder of Brendan Sorsby, because he's the guy who made the original fuck up to begin with. I agree with your point, right? Like, if you're gonna make a mistake, if you've done something wrong, I'm not talking about murder or nothing like that. Like, if you did a serious crime, I'm not a lawyer. This ain't for you. This segment is not for you if you've done like real crimes. But if you have made a mistake that could be fixed, it's always a better thing to just admit it before it becomes something that you can't control anymore. You feel me? And I think this Sorsby thing is a great example of it. Like, if he would have just admitted this shit after he did it, his redshirt year, he would have gotten in trouble, but he would have been able to come back from that a lot easier than it's going to be for him to come back from it happening where it happened in his career now. And that's his own fault. Like, I'm not going to shed no tears for him. That's his own fault. Talented guy. You know what I mean? Hope he figures it out. But can't sit here and act like he didn't do this to himself. The next one comes from Kia Adams, who says this: my 3 least favorite Browns topics in no particular order. Conversations rehashing Baker's departure. The overall narrative of the story has changed and forth. Very few speak about the situation with context and surrounding variables. Yeah, it's just become another LOL Brown story, right? Like, that's what the Baker Mayfield conversation has become, unfortunately, is another thing to make fun of the Browns about. But that's just not how that happened, man. Like, it's amazing how, some people who were in the media at the time that this situation happened, who cheerleaded the Browns doing what they did and talked about how successful the Browns could be if they went for Deshaun Watson, are now all of a sudden acting like they could never understand why the Browns did what they did. You know what I mean? It's nauseating for sure. Number 2, QB stat tracker in training camp. Low key, this one just pisses me off. You know what? It's not the stat tracker itself that makes me upset. It's that the stat tracker represents a mass amount of misinformation about how football is practiced, right? Like, the stat tracker existing and people being invested in the stat tracker itself just demonstrates how little we understand about football and how it's practiced. Because if you think that NFL teams are sitting there with stat sheets about what guys did in practice, and that's how they're grading these players, like, that's wrong. Like, what you do in practice obviously matters, but we don't know how they're being graded and what they're being graded on, right? Like, it's not simply whether they make more completions and touchdowns in practice. It's there's certain criteria that the coaches are looking for in every practice drill for these players. They are aware of that, and were they able to successfully fulfill that criteria? You can't tell that with a training camp stat tracker. You can't. But the existence of it kind of demonstrates how we have made a lot of strides in football literacy over the last 10 years, but ultimately the vast majority of the public is still very football illiterate when it comes to what matters in practice and stuff like that. Number 3, anything Watson related, the story has been the same for years now. Bad trade, bad money, bad play on the field. There will never be anything new added, but we talk about it every year like there's some major update coming. Yeah, man, I can't wait to be done with it. I cannot wait to be done with it. Like, at this point, it's just dragged on so long, man. Like, it's only really been almost a year and some change since 2024, where it was obvious this thing was over, right? That's where this thing died, is in 2024. But for a year and now 2 years, we're just gonna have to like kind of still have this thing going on, even though we all know it's over. And that's the part that sucks. That's the worst thing about the contract. The worst thing about the contract wasn't really the money, in my opinion. It's the part of it where we have to kind of hang on to this dead body for like 2 years because the contract makes it impossible to get rid of him, right? If this Watson story would not bug us as much if we were simply able to cut him after 2024. But since it's been structured in the way that it is, it's fully guaranteed, it's not an option. So we kind of just had to have dealt with this story for an extra year, and now 2 extra years. And that's the most exhausting part of it, right? Like, oh, yeah, are we going to get something out this Watson contract? Yeah, sure, I hope so. But, like, dude, it doesn't matter at this point. You know what I mean? Eckling Murr says this, people talking about football where they barely go to games. I go to at least 4 a year, and while I'll miss being at games like the Jameis Snow Globe game, I can't wait to be in a cozy, loud dome watching the Browns win ball games. Here's the key part about wherever the Browns play. If they win games wherever they are, you will love wherever they play. Right? If they lose games wherever they are, you will hate wherever they play. Ultimately, wherever they play is a footnote to the main thing going on, which is the Browns playing football, right? Like, we could talk about all the elements, the weather, all that stuff. I have seen the Browns play in a lot of bad football games with awful weather that we don't remember. Right, we remember the good ones, right? The Jameis Snow Globe game, the ones that happened during memorable seasons. Like, sure, memorable moments. But we don't remember all the bad weather games, like the negative 27-degree game versus the New Orleans Saints, where the Browns, like, slugged to a 3-point loss. Like, nobody cares about that kind of stuff, right? It's about whether you win or you lose in this new place. That's what's going to make or break it. If you win games in, the new Cleveland Browns Stadium out there in Brook Park, then that's going to become hallowed ground for a generation. And it's going to be something that Browns fans of the next generation couldn't imagine going without. If you lose a bunch of games there, it's going to be just like Cleveland Browns Stadium, where we talk about that stadium being soulless and everything else. That's the hilarious part to me, because I've grown up where people would just talk endless shit about the stadium, right? Like, that was my entire childhood, is people talk about how much they hate new Cleveland Browns Stadium, even though it was on the lakefront, even though it was a homage to Municipal Stadium. Nobody liked that stadium. They called it soulless. They said it was never as loud as the old stadium. It didn't have the character of the old stadium. And then now, fast forward 20 years later, people are trying to make the same argument, but substituting Municipal Stadium for Cleveland Browns Stadium. And ultimately, how you feel about that stadium has nothing to do with the actual stadium itself. Municipal Stadium was a dump. Everybody will admit that. But the Browns actually won games there, so people liked it. It had soul. It had character, because the teams that played there weren't dog shit all the time, right? And if we get to this new stadium and it's a new era of the Browns and we got good quarterback play and we got good football teams in there consistently, then we'll be like, oh man, this is the best thing they've ever done. It's really that simple. Also, like, look, I'm just gonna keep it real with y'all. I don't know how many of y'all have been in domes recently, right? Like, if your last experience with a dome was the RCA Dome, or like, one of those like old school early 2000 domes, That ain't what they building anymore, okay? If you've gone to Minnesota, if you've gone to Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, y'all gonna like it. Like, it's going to be expensive. They're going to have the same affordability questions that people are having right now with Cleveland Browns Stadium. But at least when you spend $70 for it, well, it's probably like $140 now. $140 for a ticket to get into a Browns game, you're not going to be sitting in some substandard seat that was made to be like a $25 ticket. At least you will feel like you're getting more of your money's worth if you spend that kind of money to get into Brown Stadium once they built the new one, because it will actually be state of the art and it will be like enjoyable. I promise you that, right? Like, it will be an experience and you will like going there for not just Browns games, but for concerts and other things, you know, that they could bring into the city like that. And, you know, it is really cool when the city of Cleveland can have a Final Four or, you know, a big wrestling event there. Like, that kind of stuff is underrated until you experience it. And once you experience it, it's pretty cool. Like, you know, where I live, it's one of the FIFA host cities, and that's been like really fun for me to be able to engage with. So, you know, imagine something like that coming to Cleveland. You know, that would be really cool. But all in all, yeah, I agree with you about the stadium. Maybe I do like talking about the stadium because every time I get a topic, I go on way longer than I need to. All right. Jordan Nord says this: I genuinely believe that Andrew Berry is a sound and logical decision maker. It's only a matter of time before he hits on a quarterback. He's gotten incredibly unlucky. Watson's decline from a top 3 quarterback to NFL league average backup play, that's being generous, is one of the biggest NFL declines in NFL history. He wasn't even backup play in 2024. I'm just using like, you know, the EPA per play metrics, the success rate. He was 74 out of 32. Well, out of 75 quarterbacks in 24. Also, Chubb and JOK retiring and career-altering injuries, terribly unlucky. I agree with you that Andrew Berry has had his fair share of misfortune, but also part of the job is dealing with misfortune, right? Like, part of the job of being a GM and what separates good GMs from bad GMs are how they flip unfortunate situations to fortunate situations, right? The reason John Lynch isn't looked at as a failure despite drafting Trey Lance is because he was fortunate enough to take a chance on Brock Purdy, and that worked out, you know? So that bailed him out of that, right? You know, like stuff like that. You know, like, I get it. He's had some misfortunate things, but he also has to dig himself out of it. And that's also what he's going to be judged on as well. So yes, but also no. We're going to continue, but I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fun way to earn cash while you watch your favorite teams. No complex betting rules. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Here are my picks for this upcoming season, AFC North edition. Jimmy Bernard, I have less than 475. This has to do with volume available in Pittsburgh's offense. Quincy Judkins, I have over 975. Browns improved line. I think the run game is going to be better with it. Chase Brown, under 900 yards. Joe Burrow equals less rushing yards usually for the Bengals offense. Mark Andrews, more than 475 yards. Lamar's going to need a safety blanket. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You could follow me on the app at Quinn_C to see all my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineup to download the app using the link in the description. All right, this one comes from Shocker Radio, who says Andre Schmidt needs to have as good of a year as he had last year. Yeah, I agree with that. I think he needs to be, yeah, again, the trinity for the Browns to win games this season, right? If you're out there, you want the Browns to win games, you need them to have 3 things, because more than likely, amazing quarterback play is not on the table for the Browns. You know what I mean? Just being realistic here about what we know about this quarterback room. It's not one that would inspire much hope, especially if you're looking for people looking at this situation outside of like the rose-colored glasses of being a Browns fan, right? Like, we're always going to be hopeful that whatever quarterbacks we throw in that room are going to be successful, but that's because we want the Browns to be successful. You know what I mean? But everybody else who looks at this room kind of sees the writing on the wall more than likely. So if you want to be successful and you're anticipating that being the case with the quarterback room, run game needs to be much better. Defense needs to be as good as it was last year, and your special teams needs to be good. And that means Andre Schmidt needs to make a lot of kicks, because you're going to ask him to make a lot of kicks. So That's kind of the holy trinity for the Cleveland Browns right now: special teams, defense, run game. If you get those three things going, you can win games in the NFL, no matter who your quarterback is. Anthony Roberts says this: they are banking on a big jump of quarterback, no matter who they're starting, based on the improved offensive line and added receivers and a more potent run game due to the O-line as well. I don't know if that's them banking on a big jump of quarterback play, but I think that's them saying we're going to give this offense a floor, right? That's how I would characterize it. I could get how you could say, oh, well, if this offense has a floor, then that means that quarterback play wasn't as bad as it was last year, so it did technically take a jump. But it's less about the performance of the individual quarterback and having enough options on the offensive side of the ball to give this offense a floor, right? An identity, something that they can lean back on, and something that they can win games with, despite not having good quarterback play. Jay Carr says this season has just going to be darn, I wish we had a quarterback, and darn, I wish we had Myles Garrett. That is a way that you could choose to consume this season, because I'm sure there would be plenty of moments where we can be like, damn, I wish I had a quarterback, right? And I'm sure there'll be plenty of moments where we're going to miss Myles Garrett during the season, but it doesn't have to be consumed that way, right? Like, ultimately, that's a choice whether you want to consume it that way or not. There's truth to it. Not having Myles is going to hurt. Not having a quarterback is going to hurt. But also, this roster, if they're at that place where all we're really complaining about is the fact that we don't have a quarterback and we don't have Myles Garrett, that tells you that there's a lot of young talent on this roster that's showing itself, because we're not saying, damn, I wish we had more talent, or damn, I wish we had better wide receivers. We're saying, oh man, all we really need is a good Myles Garrett and a good quarterback. Like, well, Myles Garrett and a good quarterback, and we're set. You know what I mean? It's a true glass half full, glass half empty situation. You can look at it as what you don't have, but if those are the only two things you're complaining about by the end of the season, then look at what else is filling that cup. You know what I mean? And maybe try to appreciate that as well. I'm not the biggest fan of the Myles trade. I've made my thoughts well known about this. I would have done things differently, but I'm not going to go through the season pissed about the Myles trade and look at everything as, oh, damn, the Browns should have listened to me about it, right? I'm going to try to appreciate what the Browns can bring to the table instead of what they don't have at this current moment. And, you know, that's ultimately a choice that I'm choosing to make. You might choose differently, but that's how I choose to consume it. You know, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, because living life glass half empty sounds fucking thirsty and boring. Just my 2 cents on it. You know what I mean? I'd rather laugh and smile and have a good time throughout life than worry about what it is that I don't got. You know what I mean? But everybody gonna do what they want to do. All right, James says, funny how Judkins' numbers aren't good, and it's a footnote, but you can believe he's good. Wow, and will be better with better offensive line play, but a QB can't get the same grace. A QB could get the same grace if they played better. And I think this is the false equivalency that you're making here. Quincy Judkins' numbers were ultimately still pretty good for a rookie. They just weren't what I thought he could achieve his rookie year, because he had bad offensive line play and he had to overcome it. We saw what Quincy could do. Now, if Quincy had gone out there and he had turned the ball over more than he scored touchdowns, then I wouldn't be saying these things about Quincy Judkins. Which brings us to who you're comparing him to, right? The quarterbacks on the roster. I'm assuming Shedeur Sanders is who you're caping for at this moment, because I can't imagine that you're caping for like Dylan Gabriel at this point, or Deshaun Watson. So let's say you're talking about Shedeur and saying, oh, well, you can believe that Judkins is going to be better even though he didn't have the numbers that you felt like he was capable of. But why can't you do the same thing for Sanders? And the reason is because Sanders' numbers last year weren't good. They were bad statistics. He had more interceptions than he had touchdowns. That's a classic barometer for bad quarterback play. It is fascinating watching people destroy Dylan Gabriel. And look, Dylan Gabriel wasn't good. I'm not going to sit here and act like Dylan Gabriel should get a chance to start here. But it is fascinating to watch people destroy Dylan Gabriel for having 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and then on the other hand, demand that I ignore the fact that the other quarterback threw 10 interceptions. He turned the ball over a ton, took a ton of bad sacks. Fact is that we all had eyeballs. We all watched Quincy Judkins play, and we know that Quincy Judkins looked a lot better at his position than Shedeur Sanders looked at his position. It does not mean that Shedeur cannot improve. Shedeur can certainly improve. And I think if you give Shedeur 5 or 6 years of just being on NFL rosters, over time, he will be a much better quarterback because he is talented enough to be a quarterback in the NFL. But if you're asking me what the Browns need to do this season, well, that's a different conversation. So, yeah, I'm willing to give Quincy that grace because Quincy, despite not having circumstances be a perfect around him, still managed to produce good football. Unfortunately, Shedeur did not produce good football despite his circumstances, which is why I'm not as high on Shedeur Sanders. So I hope that explains it. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.